Welcome, friends and well-wishers, to another episode of A Quarter Ton of Fun. It's your buddy Ryan here, and I want to thank you for being with me today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, some tummy issues, but I had my Pepto, and we're going to power through this, because today we're tackling a question that every fat person has been asked, and has definitely asked themselves: how in the world did I get so fat? So for me, we have to go way back to about the second grade. That is when I started chunking up. My mom used to like to tell me that at the beginning of second grade, I was the skinniest and shortest kid in my class, and by the end of the year, I was the fattest and I was the tallest. Now, I want to preface everything I'm about to say with this. I don't blame anyone else for my weight. It's on me. I'm an adult. I'm responsible for my decisions. And I think when you push that responsibility off onto other people, there's a tendency to feel like you don't have to do anything about it. It's on me. It's my responsibility. But today I want to look at the reasons that I'm so fat, because there's a reason for everything. And one of them is I was brought up with atrocious eating habits. In our house, fresh fruits and vegetables were a rarity. Almost everything was out of a box, out of a can, lots of red meat, lots of fast food, and lots of lard, lots of, gravy, basically anything that was bad for you. And I was allowed to eat amounts of things that I never should have been. My mom oftentimes would buy a whole bag. She'd bring home on shopping days, 2 family-sized bags of Doritos, and in 2 days, I personally had those gone. I'd eat the whole bags. Breakfast a lot of times was stuff like chocolate milk and Pop-Tarts, or humongous bowls of cereal. Enormous bowls of whatever sugary cereal. Lunch was usually ham and cheese sandwiches with lots and lots of chips and dip. And dinners, again, were out of a box, out of a can, fast food, frozen. And my mom had a lot on her. All the shopping, all the cooking fell on her. My dad didn't do any of that stuff. And my mom was a homemaker who babysat. At one point, she had 13 kids in the house watching them. So she had a lot on her, and she had her own food issues, which we'll get into in a bit. One of the really bad habits I learned was binge eating. And my uncle, David, who I love dearly, he would sometimes send us to the store with like $50 or $100 with instructions to get every kind of junk food we could. We would load up the cart with chips and cupcakes and cookies and ice cream and soda pop and anything we could get our hands on. We would bring it home and we would just gorge and eat and eat and eat. And there were a number of times that later in the night I got up and puked because I was a small kid. I was a pretty big kid, eating enough calories to sustain a full-grown man for like 5 days. There was no reason for it. And as a parent now, I look at it and I think, what the hell were they thinking? Why did they allow us to do that? But again, like I said, they had their own food issues and it bled over and we learned from it. And I, more so than my sister or any of my cousins, carried it on into adulthood. So through high school and into my college years, the next set of bad habits I would develop, and it was sort of a two-pronged thing. One was a love for soda pop. And I gotta blame my dad for this one. My dad was a notorious pop drinker. If he didn't have a Diet Pepsi in his hand, it was odd. There were many years where people would get him like Diet Pepsi shirts and things like that, calendars for Christmas, because they knew how much he loved it. So I learned to love pop. And it got to the point where I didn't drink any water. I didn't drink any milk. I didn't drink anything other than pop and maybe like Hawaiian Punch or other high-calorie, sugary fruit juices, Sunny Delight, things like that. The other really bad habit was what I call shame eating. And if you're a big person, you probably know what that is. I would hide out and eat. After work, I'd stop and get 12 tacos from Taco Bell, scarf them all down, and then go home and eat the dinner my mom made because I didn't want her to know what I had done. I would drop my girlfriend off at her house, who's now my wife, and on the way home, I would call up and order a pizza. And it mixed food and shame in a way that is really detrimental and really messes up your relationship to food. So Joy and I had gotten engaged, and we were engaged for about a year and a half. And during that time, I wanted to lose weight before the wedding. I wanted to look good at my wedding, you know? Well, it didn't really happen. And the reason why is because I would push it back and push it back. When you have that amount of time ahead of you, a lot of times as a fat person, you fall into the trap of, well, I'll start my diet tomorrow. And we all know tomorrow never really comes. I'd push it back and I'd think, okay, I can eat fast food. I can do it, eat junk, whatever I want because I have time. And a month would pass or 2 months. And then maybe I'd get on the track for a while. I'd start hitting it. I'd do well. I'd exercise, lose a little bit, gain it back. And I think over the course of that year and a half, I lost maybe a total of 20 pounds, something like that, which is ridiculous. I could have lost much more, especially being so young and relatively fit for my size. I could have done a lot better, but I didn't. I pushed it back and I pushed it back and I kept on eating. I love Joy and I want to be with her forever. Being with her should have been reason enough for me to be able to stop eating, but it wasn't. I kept on eating and eating and eating. So as you can see there in that picture, 5 years ago we had our son Max, and being a parent changes you in a lot of ways that are hard to describe. But this is a human being who you want to protect from the dangers and the evils of this world at all costs. And one of those dangers, one of those evils would be him having to grow up without a dad because his dad had a heart attack or a stroke at an early age because he couldn't quit force feeding himself. That should have been reason enough for me to stop eating, if anything. But it wasn't. I just kept on eating. So Max got bigger and bigger, and I got bigger and bigger. And I started to see real detriments to my health. I was missing out on things. I was having to skip out on stuff because I couldn't physically do it. And I started getting depressed. And then 2 events would happen that would fling me further and further into that depression. That picture is me with my mom and my dad, Brenda and Dave. And sadly, they are not here today. They're both dead, in large part because of their weight. My mom died of a stroke. My dad died of heart failure. And when my mom died, she went first. It came out of the blue. She had a stroke. We rushed to the hospital and she was unresponsive. I never got to talk to her again. While she was conscious and able to talk back to me, I guess. I never got to really have those final words with her and tell her what she had meant to me. And as a family, we had to make the very difficult decision to take her off of life support and let her go. And it devastated me. It broke me. Not only because of the loving, close relationship I had had with my mom, but because of the suddenness of it. It reminded me of my own mortality. It reminded me that I was on a similar path. And if I didn't stop, the same thing would happen to me. But it wasn't enough. I fell into that depression and I started eating more. And I stopped caring about myself. I got to a point where I honestly wanted to die. And I thought everyone would be better off without me. I thought my wife would remarry and that whoever it was, he'd be a better husband and a better father than me because I didn't think I had any self-worth. Now, during that time, my sister and I were taking care of my dad. And my dad, during the last few years of my mom's life, she had been essentially his nurse. He was massively overweight. He had arthritis in both of his knees. He had congestive heart failure. He had breathing issues. He had sleeping issues. He couldn't bathe or clean up after himself. He, in a lot of ways, it was like taking care of a very large, very cranky baby. And I say that as someone who loved my father dearly, but it's true. And taking care of my dad was a full-time job on top of already working and having a wife and a son and daily responsibilities. And the truth is, I just started to hide away from those responsibilities as much as I could. I would eat. I would do the bare minimum to get by at work, at home, as a husband, as a father, as a caregiver to my dad. I would shift stuff off onto my sister, onto my wife, onto my son. And I really stopped taking care of myself. I ate and I ate and I ate. And what I'm most ashamed of is that I would eat with my dad. And I knew he had heart failure. And I knew he shouldn't have that kind of food. But he would ask for it, and I would go get it. Now, he couldn't go get it. He wasn't physically able. But I was, and I wanted the food. And he wanted the food. And so in my mind, it was, well, why not? I didn't care about myself. In a lot of ways, I think my dad had given up on himself after my mom died. So we were in our miserable little shell together. And we would lie about it. Tell my sister, oh no, we didn't eat fast food. I cooked for dad. I did this or that. And we would just eat and eat. And that helped kill my dad. And that will haunt me for the rest of my life. That I didn't do enough to help him. That I actively sabotaged him and helped kill him earlier. And all of that should have been enough to get me to stop eating. To start caring about myself, but it didn't. Instead, when my dad died, I became even more depressed. And quite frankly, I was done. I was ready to give up and throw in the towel. So what is it? After all of this, after all the things that I went through, learning the bad eating habits, carrying them over into adulthood, the pop, the binge eating, the shame eating, the depression over my parents' deaths. None of it could wake me up. Being a father, being a husband, none of it could snap me out of it. What is it that finally did the trick? Well, I'm not going to tell you today. You're going to have to tune in for another episode. See, that's what we call a teaser. Instead, we're going to move on to a completely new segment. Each week, I'm going to step on the scale and weigh in and let you guys know what the numbers say. We call it Weekly Weigh-In.
Weekly Weigh-In.
Okay, so the bad news is I still can't be weighed. I'm somewhere north of 550 pounds. My scale still just comes up with an error. And
way to go, fatso.
Damn you, scale. I'll get the best of you yet. Nevertheless, moving on, I want you to all remember, let's interact together. Subscribe to this channel. When you do, a little bell will pop up. Click it. And every time I post a video, it's going to be every Tuesday, it's going to remind you so you know to come and watch along and see this pretty face. If you want to interact with me other ways, here's how you do it.
On Twitter at QuarterFun and QuarterTonOfFun@gmail.com.
And as a last bit, a call to action, if you will. If you're watching this, if you like what I'm doing, please share the video, tell your friends. I want to build this audience up and up because my hope is that there's some other people out there going through the same things I am, and maybe together we can help inspire them. So remember, if you're watching this, if you're out there, no matter what shape or size you are
damn sexy.